package arrived without warning, delivered to my doorstep by an anonymous courier. The air felt heavy, and an inexplicable sense of dread settled over me as I picked it up. The package was wrapped in aged brown paper, frayed at the edges, and adorned with stamps from places I couldn't recognize. As I carefully peeled back the layers, my fingers trembled. Inside, I found an old, dust-covered diary and a handwritten note, devoid of any signature. The note simply read, "Read at your own risk." The diary itself exuded an eerie aura, as though something malevolent was concealed within its pages. Despite a nagging sense of foreboding, I couldn't resist the urge to delve into the diary's contents. My heart raced as I opened it, the yellowed pages crackling softly. The first entry seemed innocuous enough, describing mundane aspects of the writer's daily life. But there was an undercurrent of something darker, something that made my skin crawl. As I read on, a feeling of unease grew within me. The words seemed to leap off the page, painting vivid images in my mind. It felt as though the diary was drawing me into its world, a world where the line between reality and nightmare was blurred. I glanced around my living room, half expecting to see shadows lurking in the corners. By the time I reached the end of the first entry, I was hooked. The fear that had initially gripped me was now mingled with a morbid curiosity. What secrets lay hidden within the pages of this disturbing diary? I had to know, even if it meant confronting the unknown horrors that awaited. The next few entries in the diary were ordinary, detailing the life of someone I couldn't identify. They wrote about work, friends, and daily routines. However, there was an underlying tension in the writing, a sense that something was about to go horribly wrong. The neat handwriting began to show signs of stress, with certain words and phrases underlined aggressively. As I continued reading, the tone of the entries shifted. The author described feeling watched, an unsettling presence that seemed to follow them everywhere. They wrote about hearing whispers in the dead of night and seeing fleeting shadows just beyond their vision. The fear in the words was palpable, making my own heart race as I read. The diary's author began to sound more frantic, their entries shorter and more disjointed. They spoke of sleepless nights and a growing paranoia that gnawed at their sanity. The writer described a particular night when they awoke to find a dark figure standing at the foot of their bed. The figure vanished the moment they turned on the light, but the terror lingered. As I read these entries, I felt a chill creep up my spine. The descriptions were so vivid that I could almost see the scenes unfolding before me. I found myself looking around my room more often, half expecting to see the same dark figure. The parallels between the author's experiences and my own rising fear were unsettling. Despite the growing sense of dread, I couldn't stop reading. The diary had a hold on me, compelling me to continue. I needed to know what happened to the author, what horrors they had faced. Each page drew me deeper into their nightmare, and with each word, my own fear intensified. The diary entries grew increasingly disturbing. The author detailed their encounters with the unseen stalker, a presence that seemed to haunt their every move. They described hearing footsteps following them down empty hallways and feeling icy fingers brush against their skin. The fear was almost tangible, seeping through the pages and into my own home. I started to notice strange occurrences in my house as well. Unexplainable noises echoed through the rooms at night, and objects seemed to move on their own. The parallels between the diary and my reality were too strong to dismiss as mere coincidence. I felt a constant sense of being watched, an invisible gaze that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. The diary's author wrote about their deteriorating mental state. They became reclusive, avoiding friends and family out of fear of putting them in danger. The entries were filled with desperation, begging for answers and a way to rid themselves of the haunting presence. The vivid descriptions of their fear and isolation mirrored my own growing paranoia. One night, while reading an especially harrowing entry, I heard a loud crash from the kitchen. My heart pounded as I cautiously approached, only to find nothing out of place. The sense of unease was overwhelming, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking just out of sight. I felt like I was living the author's nightmare. As the author's fear escalated, so did mine. The diary spoke of sleepless nights, with the presence growing bolder and more aggressive. Shadows seemed to move of their own accord, and the author described seeing the dark figure more frequently. The tension in the writing was unbearable, and I found myself constantly on edge. Despite the fear, I couldn't stop reading. The diary had become an obsession, a morbid curiosity that I couldn't resist. Each entry pulled me deeper into the author's terror, and my own sense of reality began to blur. The line between the diary's horror and my life was becoming indistinguishably thin. The diary entries took a darker turn, revealing the author's slow descent into madness. They wrote about hearing voices, whispers that filled their mind with dread. The presence was no longer just a fleeting shadow. It had become a constant companion, tormenting them day and night. The author's once neat handwriting became erratic, reflecting their fractured state of mind. I could feel the author's fear and paranoia creeping into my own thoughts. The voices they described seemed to echo in my head, a persistent, unsettling murmur that I couldn't escape. The once safe confines of my home now felt like a prison, with unseen eyes watching my every move. The boundary between my reality and the diary's horror was dissolving. The author wrote about the presence invading their dreams, turning sleep into a battleground of terror. They described vivid nightmares where they were chased by the dark figure, unable to escape its grasp. The exhaustion and fear from these nightmares began to take a toll on their sanity. I found myself dreading sleep, fearing what horrors might await me in my own dreams. As the author's grip on reality weakened, so did mine. The diary spoke of hallucinations, shadows morphing into grotesque shapes, and voices whispering dark secrets. The sense of isolation was overwhelming, with the author feeling utterly alone in their torment. I could relate to their despair, feeling as though I was teetering on the edge of the same abyss. The presence became more aggressive in the diary, and the author's desperation grew. They described trying to fight back, but their attempts were futile. The fear was suffocating, and their writings became a frantic plea for help. I felt a deep connection to the author, their terror resonating with my own growing fears. The diary had ensnared me completely. The relentless torment described in the diary was now mirrored in my own life. Every creak and whisper in my house felt like a manifestation of the author's fears. The presence that haunted them seemed to have found its way into my world, feeding off my fear. The diary's grip was unyielding, pulling me deeper into its nightmarish reality. One particularly chilling entry in the diary issued a dire warning: stop reading or face the consequences. The words were scrawled in a frantic, almost illegible script, the letters barely contained on the page. A shiver ran down my spine as I read the message, but my curiosity overpowered my fear. Ignoring the warning, I pressed on, determined to uncover the diary's secrets. As I continued reading, the entries became increasingly erratic. The author's fear was palpable, their desperation seeping through the pages. They described their futile attempts to rid themselves of the presence, trying everything from rituals to prayers, all to no avail. The present seemed to feed on their fear, growing stronger with each passing day. My own life began to mirror the chaos described in the diary. I started seeing fleeting shadows out of the corner of my eye, and the whispers grew louder, more insistent. Sleep became a distant memory as nightmares plagued my nights, filling my dreams with the same dark figure that haunted the author. The warning in the diary felt like a prophecy unfolding in my own life. The author's entries detailed their growing paranoia, convinced that the presence was no longer confined to their home. They felt pursued, even in broad daylight, the sinister figure lurking in every shadow. The fear was all-consuming, driving them to the brink of insanity. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, the sense of being watched becoming unbearable. Despite the terror, I couldn't stop reading. The diary had become an obsession, a dark compulsion that I couldn't resist. Each page pulled me deeper into the author's nightmare, blurring the lines between their reality and mine. The warning echoed in my mind, but the need to understand the diary's mystery outweighed my fear of the consequences. The present seemed to tighten its grip on both the author and me. The diary entries grew shorter, filled with frantic pleas and desperate questions. The author's fear was infectious, seeping into my own psyche. The sense of impending doom was overwhelming, but the diary's pull was too strong to resist. I was trapped, just as the author had been. The diary's entries became increasingly disjointed, a testament to the author's unraveling sanity. They wrote about their life falling apart, consumed by the haunting presence. Friends and family were pushed away, unable to understand the invisible terror that stalked them. Their isolation was complete, a lonely battle against an unseen enemy. My own life began to crumble in similar fashion. I withdrew from social activities, avoiding friends and family out of fear that they might notice my growing paranoia. The house that was once my sanctuary had become a prison, its walls closing in around me. The diary's descriptions of fear and isolation mirrored my own experiences, blurring the line between past and present. The author described vivid hallucinations, their mind plagued by grotesque visions and eerie sounds. They wrote of shadows morphing into nightmarish shapes, whispering dark secrets that eroded their sanity. My own home became a theater of horrors, each creak and rustle amplified by my imagination. The once familiar surroundings now felt foreign and hostile. The diary's influence grew stronger, its hold on me unrelenting. Each entry felt like a descent into madness, the author's fear becoming my own. The presence seemed to seep through the pages, an intangible yet pervasive force that clouded my thoughts. The once clear distinction between reality and nightmare was now a hazy blur. In one particularly disturbing entry, the author mentioned my name. It was impossible, yet there it was, scrawled in the same frantic handwriting. I feel you. your name. The shock of seeing my name jolted me, a chilling confirmation that the diary's horror had crossed into my world. My heart raced, and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. Despite the terror, I couldn't tear myself away from the diary. It had become an obsession, a dark addiction that I couldn't shake. The author's desperation resonated deeply, a reflection of my own spiraling fear. The presence, once confined to the pages, was now a living nightmare, its shadow cast over every aspect of my life. In one particularly disturbing entry, the author mentioned my name. It was impossible, yet there it was, scrawled in the same frantic handwriting. I feel you, your name. The shock of seeing my name jolted me, a chilling confirmation that the diary's horror had crossed into my world. My heart raced, and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. Despite the terror, I couldn't tear myself away from the diary. It had become an obsession, a dark addiction that I couldn't shake. The author's desperation resonated deeply, a reflection of my own spiraling fear. The presence, once confined to the pages, was now a living nightmare, its shadow cast over every aspect of my life. The diary entries grew more frantic, detailing the author's desperate decision to confront the presence head-on. They described a night filled with fear and determination, gathering the courage to face the entity that had tormented them for so long. The author meticulously planned a ritual, hoping it would banish the presence once and for all. As I read about the author's preparations, I felt a strange sense of resolve building within me. The fear that had paralyzed me began to transform into a burning need to reclaim my life. Following the author's example, I decided to confront whatever was haunting me. The house felt alive with anticipation, the air thick with tension. The night of the confrontation arrived, and I followed the ritual steps described in the diary. Every shadow seemed to writhe with malevolent energy, and the whispers grew louder as if mocking my efforts. The fear was overwhelming, but the determination to end this nightmare kept me going. I set up candles and symbols, my hands shaking with both terror and resolve. The author's ritual reached its climax in the diary, and I mirrored their actions, feeling a strange connection across time. The presence grew stronger, its oppressive force almost tangible. The room seemed to warp around me, dark shapes flitting in and out of the corners of my vision. The air was charged with a malevolent energy, making it hard to breathe. As I completed the final step of the ritual, a sudden silence fell. The whispers stopped, and the shadows receded, leaving me in a tense stillness. The diary described a similar moment, the calm before the storm. The presence was no longer lurking. It was here, ready to reveal its true nature. The fear was suffocating, but there was no turning back. The confrontation was imminent, and I braced myself for what was to come. The diary's final entries spoke of a terrible revelation, a truth that shattered the author's sanity. I felt a deep dread, knowing that I was about to face the same horror. The presence loomed, an almost tangible entity waiting for the moment to strike. My heart pounded, and my breath came in short gasps as I steeled myself for the inevitable. The air was heavy with anticipation as I stood in the center of the room, candles flickering around me. The presence felt overwhelming, an oppressive force that seemed to crush the very air from my lungs. The diary's final entries had warned of this moment, and now it was here. I felt a cold, invisible touch on my shoulder, sending a shiver down my spine. The presence began to manifest, a dark, shadowy figure emerging from the gloom. It was neither fully solid nor entirely ethereal, a shifting mass of darkness that exuded malevolence. My heart raced as the figure advanced, its form coalescing into something almost human. The fear was paralyzing, but I forced myself to stay rooted, determined to see this through. The figure's face remained indistinct, a swirling void where features should have been. It spoke without words, its thoughts invading my mind with an icy clarity. The diary had not prepared me for this, the sheer intensity of its presence. The author's warnings echoed in my mind as the entity's malevolence washed over me, a tide of dark intent. The entity revealed its true nature, a being bound to the diary by a curse long forgotten. It fed on fear and despair, drawing strength from the torment it inflicted. The author had unknowingly released it, and now it sought to bind itself to me. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I was its next victim, trapped in the same nightmare that had consumed the author. Desperation surged within me. I knew what I had to do. The diary had to be destroyed, severing the entity's link to this world. With a final, defiant act, I grabbed the diary and threw it into the fire. The pages caught quickly, flames devouring the words that had haunted me. The entity writhed, its form distorting as it let out a silent scream, a cacophony of rage and pain that echoed in my mind. As the diary burned, the presence began to fade, its grip on my mind loosening. The oppressive weight lifted, and the room gradually returned to normal. The ordeal was over, but I knew the scars would remain. The diary was gone, but the memories and the fear it had instilled in me were indelible. I had survived, but at what cost? With the diary destroyed, the oppressive presence that had haunted my life began to dissipate. The house felt lighter, the shadows less menacing. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe without the weight of terror pressing down on me. The silence that followed was almost deafening, a stark contrast to the constant whispers and unseen movements that had become my norm. But the relief was fleeting. Despite the absence of the entity, the fear it had instilled in me lingered. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, a residual paranoia that clung to my psyche. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of the lights sent a jolt of anxiety through me. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a place of unease and lingering dread. My sleep was still plagued by nightmares, echoes of the terror I had endured. The dark figure appeared in my dreams, a reminder of the entity's hold on my mind. I would wake up drenched in sweat, heart racing, the boundaries between dream and reality still blurred. The sense of isolation was profound, as if the entity had left a part of itself within me. One day, while sifting through the remnants of my life before the diary, I found a final, chilling reminder of its influence. A piece of charred paper, partially burnt, with a single line of text still legible. Never forget. It was a stark reminder that while the entity was gone, its mark on me was permanent. I was haunted not by its presence, but by the memory of the fear it had instilled. I tried to return to a semblance of normalcy, but the scars ran deep. Friends and family noticed the change, the haunted look in my eyes. I couldn't bring myself to explain the full extent of what had happened, fearing they would think I was mad. The experience had isolated me, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the lingering echoes of terror. In the quiet moments, I could still hear a faint whisper, a remnant of the entity's voice. It was a reminder that while I had survived, I was forever changed. The diary was gone, but its influence would never truly leave me. I lived with the constant reminder that some doors, once opened, can never be fully closed. The nightmare was over, but the fear would never truly fade.